Welcome to the Monetary Mixtape with Will Hoffman, founder of Hoffman Wealth Management. In this podcast, we help fellow Gen Xers simplify complex wealth issues that are important to Gen X. We do this by cutting out the mundane material and using a refreshing approach to finances in a way this skipped generation appreciates. Join us for this ride where we explore financial planning and wealth management as Will Hoffman draws from almost 20 years of experience and brings to you qualified guests to help be your latchkey to tricky monetary affairs.
Welcome to Monetary Mixtape with your host, Will Hoffman, where we talk about the ever-forgotten Generation X. I'm Wendy McConnell. Well, Will, we are going to have some fun today, right?
Yes, we are. This is going to be an exciting episode as we are zeroing in on the holiday season. It's a great opportunity for us to talk about the toys and holiday traditions from Generation X that are etched in our memories. We have the perfect guest with us to do that today. Today we have Jon Reddick from GenXGrownUp, and I'll let him discuss his platforms there. Monster YouTube channel, great podcast, a lot of Gen X gaming history, but I'll let him talk more about that. He is a well-credentialed nerd of the 80s, classic game fan, and technology geek. In 2017, he merged those interests into the creation of GenXGrownUp, YouTube channel and audio podcasts that are celebrating all things Gen X. Jon, welcome to the Monetary Mixtape.
Well, thank you, Will. It's absolutely my pleasure to be invited and really glad to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to talk about this. This research was fun, even though we do like to focus a lot on the wealth management topics of Gen X. This is one that we want to keep a little bit light, get everybody focused on the holidays and enjoying their holiday season with their friends and family. So just a quick little wealth management discussion before we get into all of this. There's been a huge discussion in 2022 about inflation. The inflation that's impacting a lot of the policy, having its impact on the markets, probably impacting our financial plans, impacting our spending. And it's not new. You know, we've had high inflationary environments in the past. And every year there's an index that's published by one of the big banks that discusses the cost of the 12 days of Christmas. It's a fun way to see what it cost last year and what the 12 days of Christmas will cost this year. Unfortunately, that index has not been released as of the recording of this episode. So what I was able to find was the cost of Christmas trees, real Christmas trees that are making a comeback in households. And I think Gen X is leading that comeback with the real Christmas trees, trying to tap into their Ralphie Christmas story vibes and get access to a real Christmas tree. So if you bought a Christmas tree last year, the average price nationwide of a real Christmas tree was $81 in 2021. This year, the survey of the Real Christmas Tree Board, which is kind of stunning to hear that there is a real Christmas tree board in the United States.
Right.
They interviewed 55 wholesale growers and found that the average price is now going to be approaching $100. A $20 increase, and they noted that labor, shipping, production costs, which I don't think production of a Christmas tree needed to started well before 2022, right? But production costs and other things have led to that increase. So if you are buying a Christmas tree, you're going to see an increase in prices this year. But as we segue into our discussion about Gen X holiday traditions and toys, hopefully all of your Beanie Baby investments have kept pace with inflation, and maybe it's time to think about making a sale there so that offsetting the cost of inflation will help. Jon, what do you think? Do you think those Beanie Babies have kept up?
Well, yeah, you got to keep them new in tag, with the tag protector on it. And
Right.
Beanie Babies is one of those, what I think everybody thought was going to be, oh, this is my retirement plan.
Right.
And they were kind of doing this little rise, and then only the most rare ones really held their value really well, it seems. And I think that's why so many of the toys that I claimed were an investment when I was, come on, let's buy it. It's going to do well. I would tell my mom, and then she sold it at the garage sale for 25 cents because it wasn't holding its value.
Yeah,
if she just held on for another 10 years,
That's a sore subject that we'll get into here in a second with me. I do still have all of my baseball cards.
Oh, nice.
However, I'm still working. So that hasn't really panned out, although those have made a comeback recently too, as far as popularity is concerned. And the addition of things like Pokemon cards and things have helped there. But the baseball cards, I'm still holding out that the 13-year-old investor in me that had baseball cards is going to be right at some point in time, very, very soon.
Well, it's because nostalgia is such a powerful drug, Will.
Yes.
It's when you had it, it was great.
Mm-hmm.
When it was in the closet, it wasn't great. And then when it went to the yard sale, you didn't care. The problem is what No's generation can figure out is that it's that gap between the closet and between 10 years later when I'm an adult and go, God, I missed that thing. That's when the spike happens in so much of these collectible things, and we're just hitting that Gen X era where everybody's kind of like, oh, it's been gone for 20 years. And now it's hard to find and becomes valuable.
But my question is, will you be able to part with those baseball cards?
Yeah. There's no sentimental attachment there for me.
Okay.
All right.
That's easy.
Is what I won't be is a long suffering Pittsburgh Pirates fan. It is tough to give up the nostalgia of the early 90s when they were good. But it's been such a long time that, I think time has passed and it's time to move on from some of those cards. I still have.
I think Will is saying he's a fair weather fan. That's what I got.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and the weather hasn't been very.
And you've
fair
been beaten down plenty
for a long time, right? Although I have not taken on any other baseball teams as my favorite. I just there's generations beyond us that have no idea what good baseball in Pittsburgh is like. But
you just hold out on your true love and
every. So as we get into Gen X holiday traditions, the one thing that sticks with me, and this isn't something that is unique to Gen X, but it is something that it's hard to find now, and the nostalgia does creep in, was the mall. And the shopping malls of the 80s and 90s at the holiday season with the train displays and the crowds, and you couldn't find parking. The food courts were lined up around the corner. You had to wait in line to get into Tilt while your mom and dad shopped. And now Tilt was the name of the arcade at least in our shopping malls.
You're singing my song.
Yeah. So that's always something. You go to the malls now, and at least the malls in our area are nice. They're far and few between. They're seeing their moment diminish a bit just with the advent of technology. When you think of that, John, what type of holiday traditions at the mall do you think of?
We did a whole episode about the mall experience not long ago on our show. And, we talked about how, including the holidays, where now it is not, it's easy to say it's not like it used to be.
Sure.
But when you drill into what is it that it's not like it used to be, the mall used to be this hub, especially for Gen Xers. We were in our teens, probably, depending on when you were born. I'm a 69 baby. And this was pre-social media. This was we could drive, and it was the place to hang out, is where you got to see your crush. It was where you found out who was dating who. And $20 was a whole day at the mall, right? You'd go to the mall and you said, I would stop by Tilt and play some games, and I'd go to the food court, then I'd go to Spencer's and look at the naughty posters, and I would go somewhere, and then I would go back to the arcade to blow whatever money I had left.
Right.
And then somebody picked you up at the end of the day. But in the meantime, you weren't, and it wasn't an isolated experience. All your friends were there because that's where we all hung out, because there was no online to hang out and do. So you had a much more in-person experience. And for Christmas time, that's when the mall just explodes at Christmas. Everything that was great about the mall was cranked up to 11 around the holidays because they were having special, prizes and drawings, and Santa was there. It was a Christmas, and the train, and kids were running around, giveaways, and people were trying to hand you free stuff at the Orange Julius. And it was, part of Christmas was going Christmas shopping, or you just going to the toy store and seeing what stuff you wanted to ask for Christmas.
Right. Yeah. That's a big void now with our kids, and, they're scrolling online for their Christmas lists. And we were cruising the aisles of KB Toys and Toys R Us. And
that's one of the issues, I think, is that we don't go to the mall.
Right.
I haven't been to the mall since before the pandemic. And the decorations, just the way it looked was always so beautiful.
We go to the mall once a year, unless it's out of a necessity. And it's to see Santa with our boys. It's to go see Santa Claus, and that's the time to the mall. And it's still, our Orange Julius is gone. I don't know if Orange Julius is still a thing or anywhere else. Our Orange Julius is not there anymore. So it's you could always smell the hot dogs rolling on the hot dog roller at Orange Julius.
The Auntie Anne's pretzels wafting through, right? I pulled a little nugget from our show. By 75, I had found in my research that malls and shopping centers accounted for 33% of retail sales in the U.S.
Wow.
Compare that to even just 10 years ago. Don't worry about post-pandemic. Just today, what's that percentage?
I don't know. That's a good
2, 1. I mean, it's not the vast majority of retail sales. I mean, you got online vendors and stuff are the juggernauts there, and the malls are just picking up the scraps now. They used to be the beasts.
And the one thing that, looking forward, because that's that's my professional obligation for our clients is to look forward. Growing up in a small town, having our office in that same small town, if the malls are starting to diminish, hopefully the small town comes back to life. The Main Street stores and the Main Street hardware stores, and you think about seeing those. Unfortunately, we only see those in Hallmark Christmas movies now. But hopefully, maybe seeing those come back to life soon will be what's on the forefront there. Getting deeper into the Gen X holidays, we talked about the Christmas tree. Let's talk about what was under the Christmas tree. And when we think about the toys from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we think about all of the pandemonium over things like Cabbage Patch dolls. And we think of, the favorite toy that we opened, and it's still etched in our memory. And we'll get into mine here in a bit. And I'm sure we all have that signature morning that we remember something. John, what do you see as the signature toy that was open on Christmas Day from our generation? And we can break that down into 70s and 80s and 90s. There's all kinds of things. As technology advanced, so did the toys. And we went from action figures to video games over the course of our childhood. What do you see as some signature toys there?
Well, it started very, very low tech, right? Before they started putting a chip in everything. And you got, one that I remember was a staple, and not just for me, for every kid everywhere. Somehow, there was a memo that went out that told parents that is anything you do, you've got to buy some kind of a Nerf ball. Nerf just blew up in the early 70s. And it started with that crazy orange football. And then they started making Nerf everything, and they padded, for whatever reason, every Nerf football I ever saw had a bite out of it. I'm not sure why that happened.
Because we all had a little brother. That's why. I guess
that's why. But it especially for boys, I know for the kids in my neighborhood, it was like, as soon as you got a Nerf ball, the selling thing of the Nerf ball was that it was safe, right? You could throw it at people. Well, that's basically a license to throw it at people. So
Sure.
that's what we did. We threw it at one another. We made up new games that involved tagging your buddy and pegging him with it because we knew it would just sting a little. You know, you got hit, but you didn't get hurt.
Right.
And which was kind
Until
of
you filled up with water and froze it. But that's
yeah. Well, that's
what
what you do with the bite, right? You get the bite, soak it in the pool. Now it's heavy. It's a blast. It blows up with water when it hits.
And our parents had to be thrilled that we were moving on to Nerf away from lawn darts, right?
Oh, I still miss my jarts.
The jarts, right? My brother, I think, has a little bit of PTSD from our childhood when it comes to jarts. I think I caught him one time.
A lot of little brothers do. I think that's pretty standard.
He shouldn't have been there, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's his fault.
Right. When in 70s saw the birth of the Star Wars action figures, which was a huge thing from our childhood. We closed out the 70s with Simon. Remember the touch game and the memory game Simon?
That was just getting the beginning of those electronic toys where that's when the consumer electronics got miniature enough that they started going into toys, because before then it was like, don't give kids electronics because it's too expensive. You're going to break them. And now you got the miniaturization of these chips and they put them in everything. And that became every toy had some kind of, it talked or it moved or it did whatever. Yeah. Simon was on the forefront of that.
Yes. So as we moved into the 80s, what did you start to see as it became popularized and became favorites? So I had mentioned Cabbage Patch Kids from that was the pandemonium of the early 80s for toys. What else?
The beginning of the 80s, I leapt onto one of my favorite toys still today. And not only is it a favorite toy, but it's emblematic of the 80s. Like if you want to do some wallpaper that's 80s, right? You put like a boombox and a skateboard and some cool Ray-Bans, and you put a Rubik's Cube.
Yes.
Rubik's Cube. I mean, it has an amazing history, how it was devised as a teaching tool by Erno Rubik. And then people figured out it was fun. And so many people are infuriated by it. I remember it was so great because I went and bought the book like with my own money because I wanted to learn how to solve it. Then I found out it's not that difficult, but people still think it is. It is. It's just it's not though. I can show you, Wendy. I could teach you. It's so easy.
Don't tell me how easy it is. I could never do it.
But that exploded. It wasn't just that one toy was the thing. You didn't just get a Rubik's Cube and you're done. Everybody had a Rubik's Cube and they had one at home and they had the keychain and they had the one that was hanging on their backpack. And and many, granted, many of them were knockoffs, but the point is it saturated the market probably for the first half of the 80s and it only settled but didn't die down. So Rubik's Cube is one that it continues to be a favorite of mine.
Yes. See, for me in the 80s, it was He-Man. I was young when He-Man was introduced. I had them all. I had Castle Grayskull. I had Skeletor's Castle. I would sit and watch He-Man. It was, and just recently I just watched the Netflix series, The Toys That Made Us.
Right.
And they're highlighted as being really one of the first toy manufacturers to create a show after the toy. Most of the toys were created because of shows. He-Man went the opposite direction and is really a great marketing lesson from our generation.
That's right. I mean, now, Will, do you always, whenever you take out your He-Man and play with them, or He-Mans, is it He-Man or He-Mans? They're Masters of the Universe.
Master of the Universe, right.
When you pull them out to play with them, do you thank Ronald Reagan for making He-Man possible? Because he's the one that made that happen, Right.
And back to the sore subject that you kind of picked the scab off of earlier today. My He-Man guys did not survive a garage sale. And my mom sold them for $0.25 a piece at a garage sale. Our neighbor bought them.
Beastman, Stinkor, all gone.
Orko. I had an Orko cake which was probably my 4th or 5th birthday. My mom made an Orko cake. So I have missed both the nostalgia and the investment opportunity from my original He-Man guys that have been sold into the void and probably at 2 or 3 garage sales at this point, and a target now for Gary V, I guess, to go buy at a garage sale and flip on eBay. And I'll end up being the guy that buys them back for $30 instead of But no, my He-Man guys did not survive the binge cleaning of the late 90s.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I know you're listening to the Monetary Mixtape because you want to learn about financial planning and wealth management. If you have any questions at the end, please head over to www.hoffmanwealth.com or look in the show notes to schedule a call with us.
Man. It is fascinating, though, when you talked about the fact that it was a show made for a toy. It was, though, and I referenced the Reagan administration. The deal was, it's really, I think they even covered it in the documentary, but the thing is that ever since the origin of television, well, in the 60s at least, when they started to regulate it, there was a rule that only a certain amount of advertising could be targeted to kids, and toy advertisers were kind of basically doing what He-Man was doing. They were making shows that kind of were advertisements for toys. And the FAA said, FAA, those pilots will say,
right, the FCC,
right, FCC, in one of those three-letter acronyms, the FCC said, no, you can't do that. This is, at least educational. If it's not educational, then it can't be marketing to kids.
Right.
But in the early 80s, the Reagan administration said, you know what? You guys are grown-ups, and they dropped all that. They deregulated advertising for kids. And so shows like Mask and Transformers and He-Man and so many shows,
Voltron,
they literally, Voltron, great. They literally said, let's make a toy and let's put a story behind the toy and make that the show. And they were fun shows in their own right, but literally every new character they introduced on any of those shows, they introduced it because the mold was in production, right? It was because
right.
Here's a new guy, they probably said, hey, He-Man's like, hey, Skeletor, let me show you my Orko cake, because Will's going to get one for Christmas a little later. He's going to get a pan and everything.
Got us hook, line, and sinker. They saw us coming, right?
And it worked. It worked. Yep. And the thing is, we didn't hate it.
Right.
The problem was you're going to corrupt children and whatever. And what happened? We had one of the most amazing childhoods of any generation on record because they pandered to us and gave us what we wanted. Yeah, we told people to buy us toys. But the point was, we loved doing it. We loved getting the toys, and we loved the media they made that advertised to us because it was fun. It was tailored to us.
Yes. And I'm going to interject my favorite toy from holidays now, because it occurred in the 80s.
Okay.
The Christmas morning, I will always remember, would be the morning in Christmas of 1986 when we opened up our Nintendo.
Oh boy!
And got the Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt game. That mine still works. That did survive any garage sale. It's still at my house. It still works. I still have all my games. I still have to blow in them before I play them. It still works. My kids were amazed at how quickly I can go through Mario Brothers. The muscle memory is still there. A little bit of a funny story. The first person in my house, now I grew up with, I have a younger brother and a younger sister. My dad got into Nintendo. They made a golf game that my dad loved. Tetris was a favorite of my parents. Also, the first person in my house to get past Bowser the first time. And that was in World 1-4, because we didn't know there was anything beyond 1-4, was my mother.
Oh, really?
My mother was the first one to get past Bowser the first time. We woke up the next morning. She couldn't wait to tell us. And then she told us that our princess was in another castle, and there was more beyond that. Now, I was 8 and my brother would have been, 5 or 6. So we didn't realize that Mario's world was so much broader, larger, than the first.
Right. Well, we were used to those single screen games like your Pac-Man and your Donkey Kong and your Frogger. It's like a goals to get top to bottom, and that's the game. And Mario was so much larger. And you were probably crestfallen to find out that, oh no, the princess is in another castle.
Right.
Who knew that opened up a world of amazing adventures for Mario.
Right. And there were 8 more castles we had to get through. Right.
The princess is forever in another castle. That's how it goes. And that's
right.
That's why we can keep playing.
May have been the signature theme to my dating as a child too, was the princess always seemed to be in another castle.
Sorry, Will, not this one.
So that was my favorite toy, and we're going to talk about our favorites, but I want to interject theirs because I have a feeling that when we get to the 90s, you're going to compound on what my Christmas was. So go ahead. When we get to the 90s.
Oh man. So I don't know if it's my favorite toy, but it's definitely one that made a huge impact. So being a little bit older by the 90s, I graduated high school. Actually, I was out. So I was out driving cars and running around, but I definitely appreciated and had and played the hell out of the evolution of the NES. And that was the Game Boy.
Yeah.
That came out in 91. And I was actually a proponent of the Atari Lynx that was in many ways a superior handheld to the Game Boy. But the Game Boy we just talked about Mario. It had Mario. Right. It had that quality over quantity philosophy that Nintendo had. And my grown daughter today manages a used video game store, and people will still come in and buy PlayStation 5 and Xbox One stuff, but they're also going to see what's on the old Game Boy shelf. They want to say like, oh, I had that. I want that one. Even if they're not playing it, they want to hold that square cartridge that they knew was in their pocket when they were in a car with their parents, or they were on a trip, or they were visiting somebody or whatever. That becomes a totem of your childhood. Even if I'm not putting it in a Game Boy, that thing represents a kind of escapism from adult life.
Right.
And the Game Boy let you take your game out of the house.
It made the road trip tolerable, right?
Yeah. I can imagine your Christmas, you never left the house when you got your NES. Well, now you can leave the house, right, and you can have your cake and eat it too. You can leave and continue to play.
Take it to grandma's house whenever the adults are talking.
Right.
We can tuck in the corner. Yep. And then they started with the accessories.
Mm-hmm.
The Game Boy Light,
Yep.
and the magnifier glass that went over the top, so you could see a little bit bigger screen and play at night when you were supposed to be going to bed, and all of that. Yeah,
it looks like a behemoth when you bolt on the battery and the magnifier and the speakers and the worm light and all that stuff.
Yeah.
and it was a battery drain, but anything that allowed you, like, well, now I can play in the dark. Well, now I can play with my headphones. Well, now I can, all those things. It was, again, an extension of my escape from the adult world, and I can jump back into my game wherever I'm at. It was awesome.
See, when I think of the 90s, I think of Tickle Me Elmo. That was sort of the explosion that we experienced with Cabbage Patch Kids reemerged with Tickle Me Elmo, and folks waiting in line for this, the doll that, we had grown up with Sesame Street. Mm-hmm. And I can still hear it and see Tickle Me Elmo. And then they had the different versions. My oldest son had a Tickle Me Elmo version at one point. So it's also transcended generations.
And that's what I've yet to understand. Like, I understand the appeal of the Cabbage Patch Kids. I think those are really cool. It was a great idea they had where they made them individual and they have them a birth certificate. But Tickle Me Elmo was just a mass-produced Sesame Street doll with a motor and a speaker in it. And why was it such a absolute watershed moment for toy collectors? Why did everybody have to have one? It seems like it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
Somebody who loved Tickle Me Elmo will tell me someday, but I feel like it was just one of those snowballs, that it wasn't that everybody wanted one. It was, I'll channel my inner millennial. It was a little FOMO, a little fear of missing
right.
out.
If you didn't have
everybody wants it.
Because then it took off with, like, the Furby was after that, and everybody wanted this smaller version of Tickle Me Elmo and that you could raise and it laughed, and then the what were the little keychain, like, pocket pets, the
Tamagotchi,
that's what it was, right?
Tamagotchi, right.
So as we start to wind down, Wendy, when you think back to Gen X, what was your favorite toy? What was the signature toy for Wendy growing up?
Well, when you talk about, like, opening on Christmas morning, I have the loser version of what you guys are talking about, the video game console in television.
Oh, okay. I love in television.
Which most people probably have not even heard of. We always got the wrong brand of everything. We got a Betamax instead of a VHS machine. But the things that I remember playing with the most are Light Bright.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I loved. And Weebles.
Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. That's right.
They were huge.
Yep.
Yeah,
those are good picks.
There's and John, so our resident toy expert, what's the favorite?
Oh boy,
in yours or your opinion, what was the favorite toy that Gen X is probably sitting at home saying?
Oh man, I'm going to go with I could pick generic what Gen X thinks, but when I think of Christmas and I think of toys, it's very personal. So I think me.
Sure.
And under the Christmas tree, there were two things you always had. They were staples. I always had an Atari cartridge or a few, and I always had some Legos or a few. But the one that I keep thinking back to, and is actually my holy grail to reclaim, is I was and still am a huge nut about the $6 Million Man. And I had $6 Million Man, and I had the Bionic Woman, I had Maskatron, and I had all of his vehicles, and had all that stuff. But in 1977, somehow Kenner came up with the brilliant idea to release Oscar Goldman, the $6 Million Man's boss. And it's a 12-inch action figure with like a tweed jacket and slacks. But it made the universe so much realer, because it's like, yeah, I have the heroes, but now I have like the hero's boss, like the guy he talks to that gives him missions, and it expanded play. And plus, Oscar Goldman had this amazing exploding briefcase. And if you've never seen it, it was just a trick where if you pulled the handle and turned it, it would open normally, and inside were like little tiny manila file folders with confidential stamped on them. But if you turned it without pulling it out first, it exploded. The top popped off with a spring, and the part that opened looked all like cooked and fried and burnt and exploded. It's just like a little magic trick, basically. But it added so much to my play, and reclaiming an old Oscar Goldman, like an original one in the box. In the box, they're going for $300, $400, $500 now. Wow. I have one out of the box, but I don't have the exploding briefcase, which was kind of like the linchpin for it. But I remember getting that. And what happened was Oscar Goldman became the boss of all of my toys and action figures, right? If I had a stuffed animal, Oscar Goldman told him what to do that day, right? He wasn't just the head of OSI. He was the head of everything in John's playroom. So he was my favorite it's awesome.
So let's transition quickly. I'm only going to one gift toy that I just don't get. I'm going to call it the worst of our generation.
Ooh,
I can't wrap my head around it. I never understood it. It's probably a nod to marketing genius. Was the Pet Rock. I can't. The non-toy. I can't understand how this gained popularity, how it was a must-have in the 70s, this Pet Rock that I wasn't there for it. I don't get it. I don't know if any of you can help me understand this, but I mean, how disappointing if you're bad, you're told you're getting a lump of coal for Christmas, and now we're opening up a lump of coal and a Pet Rock. I can't wrap my head around why the Pet Rock was so popular.
I never got it either. I always just kind of felt like the Pet Rock is a collective delusion that everyone was buying into.
Yeah.
Because we all knew deep down it was just a rock. But I remember someone got a genuine Pet Rock. The thing was, it had to be in the box. It had holes punched in it for air. Like,
right. I'm looking at a photo of it right now.
Like a bed of straw for the rock to lie on, so it was comfortable. And then you take it out, and for a second you're like, okay, let's see, what is it that's special? And then a couple of minutes you're like, it really is just a rock. Like, you're certain. I remember the first time I encountered one at a friend's house, and I'm like, I can't wait to dig in and see what the deal is with it.
Right.
And you keep looking for the thing that makes it interesting. It's just this. We're all going to agree that it's funny and cute. It's a pet. It didn't make any sense to me either.
Easy to take care of, I guess.
Yep.
So as we wind up and hopefully our listeners and fans of the Monetary Mixtape, nostalgia has been struck. If they want to hear more, John, and see more about GenXGrownUp, your content and the things you discuss, what's the best way for our listeners to start to follow you and check out some of the stuff that you talk about?
Yeah, well, the absolute easiest way is to go straight to our website, which is GenXGrownUp.com. That's GenXGrownUp, all one word. And that's how you find us anywhere.
Okay.
We create regular YouTube content. You can go to YouTube and search for GenXGrownUp. We have a weekly audio podcast where every week we talk about nostalgic stuff that we remember and fondly and how it's changed and that sort of thing. from a perspective of Gen Xers who were there when it happened, instead of just young guys talking about, oh, that's nostalgic. No, that's my stuff, right? We're talking about it from the perspective. Exactly. The podcast, the YouTube, the website, you can find it all there. It's myself and my two co-hosts, Mo and George, every week on the podcast. And we have a huge and amazing following of folks that we absolutely adore. We also have a great Discord server. You can head over to GenXGrownUp.com/Discord to engage with us and talk with us directly.
And as a follower and fan, it's fun stuff to decompress for a while and go back to our childhood and see what we were so fond of. Like you said, we grew up in the gilded age of childhoods. We had all these toys, all these electronics, things that we haven't even been able to talk about, like the Tiger handheld video games. I always remember Mad Balls. Yep. Go over to GenXGrownUp and check out Jon and his co-hosts' content and material on this stuff.
The cool thing about being a Generation Xer, Will and Wendy, is every generation believes they had the best childhood. It's just that we can rest comfortable knowing that we are correct.
Right. That's right. Well, as we close now, this is going to be our last episode of 2022. I want to say thank you for all of you for listening. This was a new venture for us this year. It's been one of the most fun things I've done in this profession in a long time. I'm really looking forward to 2023, having more guests on like Jon that tap into our nostalgia, our childhood, while we mix that all in with some wealth management and investment insight, and really looking forward to the content and topics and guests that we have coming up for the next year. So all of you, thank you for listening. Wendy, thank you for being here with us. Jon, a giant thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Can't wait to have you back and look for some more opportunities for us to do some things together. Remember, if you want to get in touch with us, hoffmanwealth.com is our website. Links are in the show notes for you to be able to book a discovery call with us, that if you have any questions or anything that we can help with. But in closing, please make sure you have a wonderful holiday season, a safe holiday season, and hope that you're all looking forward to a prosperous and healthy 2023. Thank you all.
And thank you for joining us today on Monetary Mixtape. Please like, follow, and share with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Don't bounce just yet. The street lights haven't come on. Thank you for listening to the Monetary Mixtape Podcast. If you thought this episode was dope, then click the follow button to be notified when we drop a new episode. Visit our website at hoffmanwealth.com or give us a call at 724-522-5411. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Hoffman Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Hoffman Wealth Management are separate entities from LPL Financial. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly.